1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 8.
Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden, and we are back with another first round series preview. After this one, you can watch the other previews on our social media or YouTube channel, so go check those out. But you're going to want to keep it locked here for this one. The Leafs will face the Canadiens for the 16th time in the playoffs, but the first in 42 years. Toronto hasn't made it past the first round in 16 years, and that's despite making the playoffs in 5 straight seasons now. On its face, Steele, this series looks like a huge mismatch. The Leafs went 7-2-1 against the Canadiens, and Toronto's goalies were stellar. Jack Campbell went 4-1-1 with a .918 save percentage, while Frederik Andersen, he was 3-1 with a .912 save percentage. On the other side, Carey Price, who has been sidelined for 3 weeks with a concussion, is expected to be back in time for the series, but he struggled mightily against the Leafs this season, going 1-2-1 with an .868 save percentage. Now, Jake Allen was a little bit better, but let's be honest, if Price is healthy, he's going to be playing in this series. So Toronto has struggled in net in their recent playoff history. Is their advantage in net this season really as big as it looks?
Yes, it really is the big difference for the Toronto Maple Leafs heading into this postseason. Frederik Andersen, like you said, he's played every single game since being acquired to the Toronto Maple Leafs back in 2016 in the playoffs. He's played every single game for them, and he's actually got some fairly good stats there. Over the last 3 years, his goals against average has gone down. His save percentage has gone up over the last 3 playoff seasons. So the stats there are pretty good. So this might be the very first time in a long time that the Leafs have a lot of faith in their starting goaltender, but not just their starting goaltender, their backup goaltender, Jack Campbell too. So I think the Maple Leafs will have to go to Frederik Andersen to start game 1. And Frederik Andersen is your guy. That's the way I felt all season. Like I've mentioned to you plenty of times over the season so far, this is a prove-it year for Frederik Andersen. So far, it's been a little bit at times dreadful to watch with the injuries, with the lack of play where he hasn't been at his best for times. But I think he still is your number one guy. I think he still has to prove it. But if he starts letting in those soft goals, you have a lot of faith in Jack Campbell, and you can put him right into that in that crease, and he can get the job done.
I find it interesting you think that Andersen's going to start game 1. Now, they haven't released it as of yet. I'm sure they're going to let fans know probably in the day leading up to that first game, whenever it happens. But I think it should be Campbell who goes in there. He has cooled off a little bit since that really hot stretch when he took over the net. But I just feel like the rust from Andersen might be a little bit much to put him in there in game 1, but you're right. Neither one is a bad option. This is the first time in a long time that I feel like the Leafs have a 1A and a 1B. Whoever's in net, they should be feeling comfortable there. But Toronto's playoff demons at this point, they're well known. I'm interested if you think if they could come back to haunt them in this series. If the Canadiens can win game 1, let's say Frederik Andersen gets the start and he lets a couple soft goals in. Maybe he hasn't knocked the rust off yet. Do you think the Leafs have what it takes to come back in the series under that much pressure?
They better have what it takes. They have 4 former captains in their locker room who have that veteran experience, who have those leadership qualities. Nick Foligno, Jason Spezza, John Tavares, Joe Thornton, all of those guys have been there before and have been through this in their careers. So they have the experience. They have the superstar power up front in Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, even John Tavares is still up there. He's been lights out in the last 10 games ending the season. So they have what it takes. It's just really if they can get it done, and I believe they can. I think this team has everything going for them this season. Like I said, Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews, it just seems like it's the most beautiful thing the Leafs have created between those two superstar players this season. Mitch Marner, he can't miss Austin Matthews' tape, and Austin Matthews, he can't miss the net. He's just been lights out this entire season. He's a goal-scoring machine. So I think they have everything that it takes. Their defense has gotten better this year. Their goaltending has been absolutely incredible this year from Frederik Andersen and Jack Campbell. And even if both those guys go down, you can sort of rely on David Riddick. He hasn't been his best since they acquired him, but still a great goaltender in my opinion. So I think everything is going right for them this season. And I think they get the job done against the Montreal Canadiens. Like you said, they were 7-2-1 in the regular season, and they've been the better team.
Yeah, that's absolutely why they went out and added those veteran guys like Joe Thornton. That leadership is so key in a potential situation like that. Not many teams go on deep runs and don't face some sort of, situation where they're down a game or two. There's, the rare situation where the LA Kings went on that run. I feel like they lost maybe 3 or 4 games on their way to that first Stanley Cup, but that really doesn't happen. If you're going to make a deep playoff run, at some point you're going to have to overcome some adversity. But I think it's pretty easy to say this game 1 has a lot of extra significance for Montreal, because if they can get ahead in this series, I do think maybe they can take a little bit of that mental advantage, where I do feel like the Leafs have the clear skill advantage here. And let's talk about some of those superstars you mentioned. The Leafs' big 3 all scored in double-digit point totals against Montreal this season. Austin Matthews led the way with 14 points. Mitch Marner had 11, and John Tavares had 10. Montreal's scoring was a bit more balanced, but Norris Trophy candidate Jeff Petrie led the team in points with 10 against Toronto. The big dogs are going to eat, but in the tight games when the scoring dries up, what is one player we haven't already mentioned from each team that you think will have a big impact in this series?
Well, for me, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, it has to be Nick Foligno. And that's one of the big reasons why the Maple Leafs went out there prior to the trade deadline and went out and acquired him. I think he just brings a big presence to this young as well as veteran, experienced Toronto Maple Leaf team. He's got everything that he can do. He's got 4 assists in the first 5 games that he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm still looking for him to get on the scoreboard and pot his first one in the postseason as a Toronto Maple Leaf. But he's got that physical presence. He brings that leadership quality on the bench, in the locker room, if, like you said, if they were to go down 0-1 in the first game. So I think Nick Foligno, for me, is the big key difference maker here up front on the forward end. Over to the Montreal Canadiens, I think, like I've mentioned to you before, Cole Caulfield is that vital key that I feel that can be a big difference maker. And I actually can't believe he's already played 9 games. I wasn't sure that he played that many so far in the regular season, but he's got 3 goals. All 3 of those goals were huge for his team, and I think he can be a big key difference maker. He can be a little bit under the radar since he's new to the NHL, only 9 games in, and making his first playoff appearance against the Toronto Maple Leafs. On the power play, he can be a little bit sneaky. He's got that wicked release of snapshot. That shot is just incredible. So I think for the Montreal Canadiens, use him as much as you can.
I love both of those picks. I was thinking Caulfield as well, but I also think on Montreal, if they're going to win this series, they're going to need to have a huge impact from guys like Shea Weber with that leadership, maybe being able to shut down one of Toronto's top 2 lines there on the back end. We know Petrie is a really well-rounded guy, but I think he skews a little bit more towards the offensive side. So I think Shea Weber could have a huge impact, and Tyler Toffoli. That's why Montreal went out and got him. We've mentioned this season, he's been probably the most consistent forward there. I think that if he can come through in the playoffs like he has in the past, I think that could really make a difference for Montreal. So let's finish off with a prediction. How do you think this series plays out?
It's Toronto in 6 games, and I think it's fairly easy to say that. I would have gone 5, but I think Montreal is still a really good team and will get a couple wins out of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I just don't see how they lose this series. They've been dominant in the regular season, like you said, 7-2-1. But when you have guys like Austin Matthews, William Nylander, John Tavares, and then you add those guys with veteran experience, Wayne Simmons, Jason Spezza, Joe Thornton, Nick Foligno now, there's just too much going for them. And I can't see a way that the Toronto Maple Leafs lose this series and they take it in 6 games. And if they don't win this series, Kyle Dubas has a lot to do in the offseason with switching up his vision and what he saw this team having to do this year. But yeah, I just believe that the Toronto Maple Leafs have the better team. They've been the more dominant team, and in 6 games, they'll get the job done.
I think if Carey Price was healthy and he wasn't coming off of that huge absence, I'd have maybe made this series 6 or 7 games. But I think the Leafs are going to play with a ton of urgency. They cannot afford to blow this series. It would be an absolute disaster. I'm going to take Leafs in 5 in this one. But that's all the time we have today on today's episode. Tune in for more playoff previews this week. On behalf of Steel Roden, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.